Good morning. It is the first day of December, and this is another edition of MannTalk with Michael Josem and Derek Flint. Lots to chat about today, lots in the papers, lot on Michael Josem's Twitter account. You've been getting a lot of traction. We've got some highlights. I'll pull them up on the screen. Perhaps we can go into jobs advertised in Malta. What's all that about?
Sure. So the background there is that the Isle of Man government runs a service called locate.im, which is all about encouraging people to come to the Isle of Man to move, to live, and to work. And there is a argument to be had about whether or not this is a good use of Manx taxpayer money at all, and that's up for debate. But certainly, what I think we should all be in agreement on is that if Manx taxpayers are going to fund this service to encourage people to relocate to work, the least we can expect is that the jobs that are advertised there are here on the Isle of Man, and not, as was again the case yesterday, jobs in Malta. And so that's what the issue is here, that this Manx taxpayer-funded service encouraging people to relocate to the Isle of Man is actually hosting jobs that are located over in Malta, again.
Has this happened before, Derek? Have you seen this little faux pas anywhere?
I've not. I suppose the interesting thing is that they might be located on the Isle of Man at the moment, but there's a very high risk that it will actually be located on Malta at some stage in the future, certainly with PokerStar's strategy of exit. I've not seen it. I think some of the interesting things that came out of it were the comments and the quite apologetic comments about what happened, but apparently they haven't got the capacity to check. I found that a little bit disappointing. With these things, the front end, as Michael quite rightly points out, the front end is so crucially important in terms of that PR and marketing and image side of things for the island. So the fact that somebody isn't actually screening this output as it's going on is a little bit worrying, really. They were just relying on automated services. And I don't subscribe to that fact that there's nobody to check this. There's plenty of capacity out there. Everything's running like a Swiss watch at the moment if you certainly compare the UK experience. So I don't really subscribe to that. I think it was a little bit disappointing. These things happen. We learn from them. But right now, when that whole sort of locate thing is so critically important to the island's well-being and future, it was just a little bit of a disappointing one.
I think there's a couple of glitches and errors around the government site, but fair play on Twitter. I think we had a couple of officials from that department who joined in and provided some background to what happened. So, Michael, did you feel some comfort there?
Jed, can I just jump in there? Yeah. When you say that these officials jumped in, they jumped in October, 2 months ago when the issue was raised. Obviously, it hasn't been fixed because the problem is again reoccurring just this week, and so they will pretend to fix the problem, and I will pretend to be satisfied by their explanations, and it is what it is, right? It's really debatable whether the government taxpayer, or whether the Manx taxpayer should be funding this service at all, and now we have again, for the second time, back in October, again now 2 months later, despite promises to look into it and so on, despite those such promises, it happened again. And I think that I can accept, conceptually, some people might want to spend Manx taxpayer money to import people from elsewhere. I'm not convinced it's a very strong rationale, but I can at least understand that argument. But at the very least, it has to be for jobs based here in the Isle of Man, not jobs that are advertised from the start to be in Malta. It makes no sense for Manx taxpayer money to be used to recruit people to live in Malta. That is absurd. It is nonsense, and it needs to be fixed.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't realise it was actually that old an issue. I thought it was one that just emerged the last couple of days. So that is pretty poor that it's still hanging around there. That whole sort of locate IM thing is an interesting debate, though, because my view is that the population of the Isle of Man really does need to grow. I think a critical mass of 100,000 is probably where it needs to be to sustain its future. And it was interesting. There was a thing on was it on Hansard or a written question that was up in the Keys last week. It was talking about how many people had relocated during lockdown. And it's something like 500 or 600. Now, here's an interesting thing, because I can speak to you about this in real time. I was ostensibly semi-retired, if you will, and my police pension obviously gets paid and so on. But with my allowances and with my joint allowance with Mrs. Dell, I was paying literally no tax. So how many of these people that have relocated are retirees who, again, will be able to apply for double taxation relief and will be living off a fairly modest pension and will actually pay nothing into the system? I was really fascinated by that, because I like to sort of pay my way, if you will, and I thought, crikey, I've been absolutely, I've been taking out, but I've not actually been contributing in real terms for the last 18 months when I've been sort of semi-retired. So that was quite a wake up, really, in terms of that take for the exchequer and where it stands. So it would be interesting to get a further breakdown of those figures for immigrants, to see how many are actually going to be net contributors to the island rather than those that are going to be taken out from the health service, etc.
Well, we've had my take on it before. I don't trust the trickle-down mantra. I don't believe it. I don't see it. I just see on the extreme high net worths coming here and buying multiple properties and screwing the property market. I'm not actually seeing anything in action. We should be charging people to live here. It should be a privilege to come and live on the Isle of Man and not just coast along and then eventually absorb our health services, our public services, and maybe not make the contributions that they should do. Michael?
Yeah, Jed, that's an interesting idea you raised there about charging people to live here or to move here. There's some academic discussion in the US about such a system. And as it would have worked for the Isle of Man, you could imagine, and I'm certainly not advocating this, but you can imagine, instead of the current work permit system, you just say, hey, look, anyone who pays £5,000 or £10,000 or £1,000 or whatever the number is would be able to purchase a work permit to come here and work in the Isle of Man. And that would have some interesting effects. First of all, it'd save the Manx taxpayer a chunk of money, because you wouldn't need all these bureaucrats and these officials and these committees to evaluate each and every work permit. Second of all, you would reduce the pressure on low-end wages, on lower wages, because, of course, it'd make no economic sense for someone to pay several £1,000s to move to the Isle of Man to earn minimum wage or living wage of £8 or £9 or £10 an hour. And yet at the same time, it'd streamline the process for people who are coming for high-end, meaningful jobs to come here, which might be advantageous, and it might be interesting to some people. Of course, the Isle of Man is a bit of a weird country and a weird place when it comes to immigration, because we restrict people who come here for work, but we do not restrict people who do not want to work. And it's a bit of a topsy-turvy sort of system here, in that as Derek and highlights there, if you come here and to be a retiree, there is, as an English person or a British person or an Irish person, there is no limit or restriction, which is odd and unusual. One thing I do want to footnote, however, is to, just to reduce it a little bit, is to recognise that many people contribute to the community outside of the taxation system. So I don't think we should go down the path of people only make a contribution to the community if they're paying tax. People can contribute in many other ways, as a family member, as a friend, as a consumer, as a producer, in all sorts of different ways. And people have value outside of the taxation system. But it's a bit of a weird situation. We're here in the Isle of Man. We restrict people who come here for work, but it's free movement, as the government likes to say, if you're not here to work.
Well, Derek, you've gone the other way, so to speak.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it was a mixture of family reasons and employment reasons that drew us back to the UK after 22 fantastic years on the island, and lots of other people have made that move at the same time. Similarly, talking to the removals company, that flow is perpetual. There's people coming on to the island, there are people coming off to the island all the time, because people's circumstances change. But from my point of view, I paid 18 years, a substantial wedge of income tax and national insurance to the island. So I paid my way as I went along. When my grandparents looked at moving to the island back in the 80s, one of the reasons they ended up there was because they couldn't get into Jersey, because at that time, I'm thinking about 1985, I think it was, you had to be able to pay 12 grand a year tax on Jersey to get a residency. Whereas the Isle of Man, even though it was a similar low tax jurisdiction, you didn't. So there is a bit of a question mark there in terms of how sustainable it is bringing people in. I mean, high net worths are one thing. It might be paying a couple £100,000 into the coffers, and then all the drip down stuff. And I take your views on that, Jed, as well. But overall, that whole sort of net relationship with Treasury and the individual that's living here is perhaps something which at some stage is going to have to be reviewed. But you going back to the locate IM thing there, it's all about getting more people here to work, to either fill the jobs. I say here, crikey, I'm sat in the UK, aren't I? Keep forgetting. It's about getting people to the Isle of Man to fulfil jobs that need fulfilling, aka accountants, or encouraging people to go over there and start new entrepreneurial businesses up. There's a fine line somewhere to be walked, and it'll be interesting to see how it develops over the next few years.
True, and the belief that the trickle down set, the high net worths are keeping our restaurants and nightlife entertainment going and so forth. I just don't see it, but it is interesting. The weekends, I don't know whether you were out and about, Michael, cavorting in Douglas. Was it busy? I seem to think it was, what I saw. A lot of restaurants have got bookings, a lot of functions, a lot of people out and about. And I think it's because there's quite a bit of disposable income kicking around the economy. I speak to a friend of mine who works for a well-known finance company, and he says that personal loans and home improvement loans are going through the roof at the moment. Michael, are you seeing what I'm seeing?
So on the weekend, I was down at Castletown for the Castletown Christmas lights switch on after a hockey match down there, and there was a lot of people out and about. Great to see the families out and about, and that was a lot of fun. But I certainly have no way of measuring the economic impact at the moment of how hospitality and pubs and so on are doing. But I guess one of the things that I suspect is that there are probably some places in the world that are net exporters of tourism. So, for example, the Mediterranean islands. Obviously, there are more people go to holiday there in the on the Mediterranean than would otherwise live there. And so, therefore, if there are places that net exporters of tourism, there are probably also nations that are net importers of tourism. So, for example, places like the Isle of Man. I suspect that the residents of the Isle of Man spend more money on tourism off the island than residents off the island spend on the Isle of Man. And so, therefore, it makes sense that if you have a situation whereby people are not able to travel or are severely restricted in travelling on the Isle of Man, that there is increased expenditure locally, because those people who would otherwise go and spend it in a pub in London or in Liverpool or in Spain or in Italy or elsewhere are instead spending that money locally. That story of home improvements is the perfect example. But many of my friends are local tradesmen, and they're reporting extremely busy times because people are spending more time at home, and therefore they are wanting to brighten up their home.
I am aware that retail sales of liquor have rose incredibly. And I'm aware that the likes of, say, one of the hotels, I think it's the Premier Inn, is booked out every weekend. And there's an insatiable desire for the Isle of Man residents to get away on the weekend breaks. And we remember the EasyJet flights were absolutely chock-a-block. And it amuses me to think, well, what are the spin-offs going to be? Is our alcohol consumption and other things, has there been such a craving, we're going to have some kind of medical knock-on or domestic effect in time to come? It would be a great study. And if only, say, ShopRite or Tesco could reveal the data for the increased sales, and not just, for alcohol. Well, what types of alcohol? What effects did it have? And then maybe correlate it with, I don't know, the medical future for the residents on the Isle of Man. There must be so much intelligence there, Derek.
I'm sure I read somewhere that's not confined exclusively to the Isle of Man. It was something like there's been a £1.9 billion uplift in off sales during this pandemic because people go to the pub, so they are consuming more at home. And the problem with home consumption is that it doesn't have the same controls that having to get up off your, unless you're in Wetherspoons and you've got the app, get up off your arse, go to the bar, order, come back, and so on, and the whole social interaction. I think there's probably another health pandemic which will pan out of this with regard to alcohol-related illnesses, without a doubt. To tap on to all the mental health issues and financial woes that some sectors of the community have got. These are going to be the long burn issues that lie under COVID as a sort of another long COVID issue. It's quite worrying.
Oh, well, thank you to Sainsbury's range of wines that appeared in ShopRite. If you're lucky enough to sample them, well done. Anyway, look, Michael, I've just picked something up off your Twitter account, and we are talking about power. Nuclear power.
Yeah, that's right. So I've received here a copy of a document that's been leaked from the Isle of Man Climate Change Citizens Forum. It's an Isle of Man government document which is proposing, amongst other things, and there are some reasonable suggestions in here, but in here it does suggest suggests that electricity should be produced through zero carbon means, and then in brackets, renewable energy or nuclear power as seen in the UK. And let me be very clear, I think the idea of building these big UK-style power plants on the Isle of Man is a bad idea. It's a terrible idea. If these people love the planet so much, then they should spend some time living on it, because this is a crazy idea. The government should rule it out, should rescind this document and say we are not building UK-style power plants on the Isle of Man.
So hang on, just wait. You actually visualising this?
Sure. Well, this is what the Isle of Man government is visualising. It is visualising nuclear power as seen in the UK. This is what the document says. That's what they're visualising. It's not Michael Josem's visualisation. This is the Isle of Man government with their document, with the Isle of Man coat of arms at the top of the document for Climate Action Isle of Man 2050. I think it's a batty idea, and I think it should be rescinded.
So, Derek, are we going to see a Russian nuclear sub docking alongside and plugging in?
Well, you could probably run the Isle of Man off a reactor on a sub. The interesting thing is with this is new technology, isn't it? Because Rolls-Royce are working with a number of other companies on the small modular reactor model. It's probably not as bad an idea as it sounds. I mean, I've always wondered whether or not one of the future finance gains for the Isle of Man is put a big tunnel into the side of Snaefell and bury all the low-level nuclear waste in there for a million years. I'm sure they'd make an absolute packet out of it. But a small model nuclear reactor, which are relatively quick to build, relatively cheap to build, may well be the sort of mid-core answer for the next 20 to 50 years for power, and certainly I think it's worth a watch, because nuclear is getting safer. I mean, a lot of the problems with nuclear is the legacies from the 50s, when nobody actually quite knew how dangerous it was, and all the pits that are set at Sellafield and Drig are actually, I would say, more of a risk to us than actually having a reactor on the island. I don't know. I'm keeping an open mind on that one. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. I'd want to see more, but it's one of those things which we've got to think about. We've got to think about doing something, because our energy issues, both in the UK and on the Isle of Man, they ain't going to solve themselves. So be interested to see where it goes. But no, I take your point, Michael. It's on the face of it, it looks like a batty idea, but I think the technology, certainly that Rolls-Royce are now progressing, may actually be a bit of a solution that we weren't expecting to have.
Safe nuclear power. That's an interesting thought, but those of you that live on the east side of the Isle of Man will have been welcomed by a glorious sunrise today. And I don't know whether, Michael, you saw the beautiful sunrise and the colours in the clouds, and how you could look out to that active, productive wind farm just within touching distance of the Isle of Man, and yet we choose not to dial into that type of electricity generation. Hey, but anyway, we'll just move on to the next topic, and I'll pull up the front headlines of our local rag, the Isle of Man Examiner. TT is off. What's the outcome, Mike?
It's all a bit sad. I remember that you and I spoke about it several months ago. You said several months ago that there was a 0% chance of TT happening in 2021. I was a little bit more optimistic, if you could put it that way, at 10% chance of TT running next year. I had been hopeful that maybe there was some mechanism whereby they could run it into August, where the Manx Grand Prix would normally run. But look, this is a sad situation. It is unfortunate, but not unexpected. It is sad, but not a surprise. And so now that we've made that decision, as I said yesterday, now's the time to take advantage of this opportunity as much as we can, and that is to invest in investing in local infrastructure, things like fixing up and sorting out the TT access road. Instead of the government's recently announced delays, they need to. This is another thing where they should backflip. This government has backflipped back and forth on all sorts of issues time and time again. But unfortunately, on things like the TT access road, they've backflipped away from the right decision. They were on the right track to get a new TT access road. They've now said, "Oh, look, it's going to take longer," and they're, like with their batty ideas of some sort of flyover through Summerhill Glen or something, and some sort of underpass through Braddon, and all sorts of absurd ideas. Whereas, I think they just need to get the job done, stop with these crazy ideas, widen the TT access road, and take advantage of this lull in racing.
Quite right. I mean, Derek, you've suffered the TT access road, I'm sure, for many years. It's the gateway, it's the lifeline to the hospital. And to think that at those times when people who are stressed out and they've got to manage this crazy pathway to where you may need help. Derek, I mean, you must have a view on it.
Well, the thing is, it's one of those classic examples again of I'll be blunt, piss poor planning, isn't it? You build your major health assets inside the course where it's going to be out of access for 4 weeks of the year. Then you have the prison, which you build 22 miles from your main population centre and away from those critical resources that vulnerable people in prison need. Medical services, rather than actually build it at Ballafletcher, which was the original plan when we did actually have the hospital built inside the TT course. It's one of the reasons that the health service has to spend probably in the region of 60 to 70,000 quid twice a year now to bring in a HEMS helicopter to get people in during the races. These are all the hidden on costs, the prisoner transport contract that had to be put in place because of the prison being up north and so on. The on costs of staffing, my favourite pet hates the Liverpool landing stage, are all hidden costs, and they're never actually spoken about. But as for that TT access road, I think there's a real dilemma here. I put a link up on Twitter to a very interesting article by an American journalist about his prognosis for the way TT is going to go. I think we're really at a tipping point here. the sustainability of an event which relies on a 37-mile course has now got to be getting close to the edge, for want of a better way of putting it. You look at the way that Gary Thompson's aligned himself with the, is it called the Diamond Races on the Isle of Wight, over a much more shorter, sustainable course. The very fact that that would appear to have attracted licensing just shows that we haven't got a golden egg anymore. And whereas there is always going to be that great iconography around the TT course, it has been in decline over the last 40 odd years. Whatever anybody says, it's certainly not there as it was in the 60s and 70s. So I think it's more than the infrastructure around the access road that needs to change. For long, for long years, I've advocated, well, why don't we look at a B circuit? Why don't we look at something 9 or 10 miles long, either based around the Douglas area, or everybody just decamp down to the Southern 100 course, or redevelop the Andreas racing course or something like that, and do the event in a different way. I'm sure that the people that are involved and invested in the TT are looking at these things, but it'd be nice to have that open public debate and just get away from the fact that some things are sacred cows. Everything can be sacrificed in the name of progress. And the TT course, in some respects, is a bit like Trigger's Broom, isn't it? You know, when you think about the fact that Brandish and Windy and other parts that have been realigned and reprofiled over the years, it isn't the course that it was back in the 80s and 90s. So I think it's time to move on, but move on positively. Look at how the event can be sustained into the future, but be prepared for a few shocks. I think that 2 years of no TT is going to be a real big upset, and what we come back to in 2022 may be in some ways unrecognisable to what we've actually enjoyed over the last the last 2 or 3 decades.
Interesting. I mean, Michael, you must feel the same. It's an opportunity. Maybe we could capture a wet weather option. Maybe we could put a cover for someone who's sitting in the grandstand up on Glen Crutchley Road. But go on, Michael. It's got to be more than increasing or improving the TT access road. Must be.
Well, that'd be the base. That'd be the absolute nut minimum that we should expect from our community leadership. I disagree slightly with Derek. I'm a little bit of a fan of TT. I don't like it when so-called experts come in and fiddle with stuff. I think it is right to honour the heritage and the tradition of the Isle of Man. I would not want to see any substantial changes to it. Maybe you can improve a corner here or there to make it a little bit safer. But I think the Isle of Man TT is fundamentally a sound proposition. I enjoy it. I know many other people enjoy it. It is a good event, and so hence I'd be very, I'd be very nervous about people fiddling with it, especially after the 3 years between summer of 2019 and the summer of 2022, when the next event will hopefully and touch wood will go ahead.
I don't disagree with you, but the problem is it's that sustainability thing. When you're needing 500 marshals to be able to turn the race on, how sustainable is that? And that's been my fear for a long time, because we hear little stories about gaps in expertise, skills, people being signed on at the last minute, go and sign over there. If you look at the events at Bahrain this last weekend, it was the professionalism of the marshals that saved that racing driver's life. The fact that they were on it, they were willing to get stuck into a fireball. The fact that he stepped from the flames relatively intact was down to highly trained, highly professional motorsport marshalling to staff that course with people that might not have seen a safety course or had any practical experience in the last 2 or 3 years, or have had any practical experience at all of seeing a body disintegrate in front of you, fills me with dread a little bit. And I think it's one of these things where we just have to be realistic as to what we can TT is great. The mountain course is great. I think it's one of the last great gladiatorial spectacles on earth, and it should be preserved as long as it can. But the thing is, at some stage, we're going to have to let it go, and I'd rather see it transpose into something new and equally as great, rather than actually being left to suffer a long, lingering, painful death.
Here's just another spin on it. I look around at the TT, and we all enjoy it. We're all of that vintage and that age group. But look at those who are 20 years younger than us. Look at folk that are in their teens and early 20s. How many people are you actually seeing that have got a real interest in motorcycle racing and supporting the TT? You look at the marshals around the course, the Orange Army, and you look at the average age, and you look at the genre, the demographic of the people that come to watch the TT. And I think with this, gap of a few years, I think we're going to be struggling to capture that again, and people will have found time to move on. People will be thinking about doing other things. They'll taken up new hobbies, and I think unless we really get sexy, I don't know what the answers are, but I think we could have some problems ahead with that. You look a bit dismissive there, Michael. What are you thinking?
Yeah, look, I am. In that, I think I see there's a bright future for motorbike racing and motor car racing on the Isle of Man. I guess I don't see the apathy that you see. I know a lot of young people in their late teens and into their 20s who are riding. I was at a meeting the other day at the Manx Legion where there was talk of these great 12 and 13-year-old riders who are doing fun and exciting things. And in that sense, I think the future is bright. I think this is a beautiful piece of heritage. And yes, it's true that many marshals are older than many of the riders themselves. But I think the future is bright. And if we need more marshals, then let's get more marshals. That's the solution here. Let's not abolish the 113-year-old mountain course. Let us savour that. Let us honour that. And let us share and pass on this tradition onto another generation.
Well, it's certainly one to watch, and I think we've hit the 32-minute mark for broadcasting, and it's been a good chat today, and we've had live viewers. If you want to comment, please make your mark in the box alongside. And should we return to business next week, boys? See what happens?
Yeah. Could I just leave with one thing as well? Yep. Another bit of news yesterday. Which was the passing of who is without a doubt the greatest living Manxman, Hector Duff. 101 years old. It looks like he's gone peacefully and quickly. And I'm sure that's, as they say, the way he would have wanted it. What an absolute gentleman. What a real living legend he was. I found him incredibly inspirational company for the short time that I spent with him. And a man that's left a lasting legacy. And I just, once again, as I put on one of my social media feeds yesterday, I just want to thank him for everything he did in respect of freedom, as a soldier. The fact he managed to serve a 30-year career in the police, retiring in 1974, and then still work tirelessly every day to make sure the memory of his comrades wasn't forgotten, looking after the War Graves Commission and so on. What an inspiration. God bless you, Hector. And I hope that the Isle of Man gives you the state send-off that you deserve, because you were some guy.
Yes, and may his memory be a blessing to all of us.
I think if ever there was scope for a state funeral or something of that style, this is it. So let's see. Okay, boys. Yeah. We'll catch up again.
See you, fellas.
Bye-bye. Bye.